Thank you so much, Tom, Olivia, and David, for this clarity. I love this sentence. Accountants can change the world. Not only entrepreneurs and investors and CEOs and the fancy people, also accountants are needed. We all know that measuring is difficult, but it is really necessary because, as we know, what we measure actually talks about what we consider to be success. And so it is really fundamentally behind the institutional thinking that supports any organization. The work that the Impact Measurement Group project is doing with the 16 groups of work is really fundamental in establishing new standards for impact measurement. And standards are fundamental for comparison, but also just to make it easier for everybody to manage this complexity and measure this complexity, right? Also, the work of the impact-weighted accounts is fantastic in trying to standardize and also monetize impact, right? Also very, very necessary. We should, though, be careful that these shortcuts don't become a way for us to forget about talking to our stakeholders, and this should really be the basis of any accounting system. Now, moving on, we want to talk about implementing this in practice. Can we actually develop a system of social and environmental accounting that we integrate with financial accounting? To talk about this, we have a luxury panel next, moderated by our colleague Patricia Saez.
Hello, everyone. Yesterday, we talked with Alexander Putti, Carlota P., and other impact entrepreneurs about the unicorns, the zebras, the new unicorn zebras, and I was very tempted to wear this jacket today, so here I am. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to us today. I'm honored to present the next panel. We have three persons, very, very wise people in both accounting, financial accounting and impact accounting. One from Israel, one from UK, and one from Italy, all of them based in the UK. Let me introduce them briefly. Jeremy is probably the most influential actor in the impact measurement and management space in the last 2 decades for his work pushing the agenda for accounting for value. He founded the Social Return on Investment Network in 2005 and Social Value International and Social Value UK in 2015. Now he's working across sectors to create policy change, and he's cooperating with different organizations such as IMP, the Impact Management Project, and Capitals Coalition, among others. We have Yuval. Yuval is professor of accounting and head of group at the University of Warwick. He's a leading contributor of the field of social studies of finance, and it's a very emerging field which combines and analyzes financial organizations and financial markets, and from a very interesting perspective that mixes accounting, economics, and sociology. And we will see this is a very interesting view for the field for the future. And finally, we have Paolo Quattrone. He's senior editor of organization studies at Top Academic Journal, and he's also professor of accounting, governance, and society at Alliance Manchester Business School. He's an expert in decision-making under uncertainty and ambiguity, in rethinking financial reporting practices and principles, governance systems, and data visualizations. All of these topics you see are very, very relevant for this impact economy that we are discussing this week. So welcome, all of you. My first question for you three is, we are talking today about the challenge of integrating financial accounting and impact accounting. But I would like to elaborate a little bit on the roots of this problem in accounting. So maybe we can start with Jeremy.
Fine, thank you. It's good to see the day's getting more and more exciting as we get closer and closer to accounting, and here we are with 3 academic accountants. How good can it get? I just want to pause a bit to the conversations that we've already had and been listening to, and people talking about measurement and talking about impact. And it was good to hear Tom say in the last session that we're talking about accounting to people and referencing accounting. I want to flip that around, because what we're really talking about is being held accountable by. And whatever the challenges are now with the way that financial accounting works, it is an excellent system for holding organizations accountable for their performance. Performance true in relation to their financial performance, but nonetheless pretty demanding. And I just want to kind of reflect for a second on what it would mean if the people whose lives we're affecting when we talk about impact actually could hold us to account. Because what I suspect that would mean is that they'd want as much possible net positive impact as they could possibly get, and they want it tomorrow morning, not in a year's time. And I don't think that the reality of that is really kind of drifting through what it means to change for organizations when they talk about impact. And so I don't think if we're serious about this, it's going to be hard to recreate something like that. So let's back into the existing one. Let's back into finance. And at the same time, let's remind ourselves that most decisions in the world are influenced by the kind of prices that result from financial accounting. People are shifting resources all the time. And these impacts that system has are significantly negative on both the climate and on inequality amongst a range of other issues. And that everything we're doing is probably not as fast as the challenges that is causing. So I think it's an absolute must do that we actually engage with this and get integrated if we want to stop kind of hiding from the fact that our impact isn't really as much as it needs to be, whilst telling stories that are probably higher than it actually was. So, to the kind of your challenge of how we're going to do that then, well, I think that the weird thing about accountancy, and that it, generally is so boring, not interesting, sends us all to sleep, you switch off as soon as somebody mentions it, is that has meant we've forgotten that it is actually ours. Accountancy comes out of national policy. It's governments that say to companies that they should produce accounts, and it's governments that say they should produce accounts according to some particular standards. But actually, we, as society, who put our governments in power, get to choose or influence what and how those organizations produce those accounts. So if we took ownership of that again and got involved in it, we can start to demand an approach to accounting, the accountants that are going to save your world, that forces us to consider not just financial, but also social and environmental returns all in one package. And so my kickoff for you is that we need to engage as a public policy conversation with all of us and take some ownership of it, and then change legislation.
Thank you. Yuval, what is your view?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Yeah, this is a great opportunity when accountants, I suppose, are put in their, I would say, right societal position. And just to follow up really on what Jeremy said, I prepared a very quick slide, which kind of summarizes, if you can put it up, this point in a bit of a formal manner.
They're putting the slide. Yes.
Yeah, does it work? I don't know, Patricia.
Here it is.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the question is, of course, that usually is translated as performance, is what value do organizations create for stakeholders? And I specifically say stakeholders because if you look at financial accounting, at least the mainstream element of financial accounting, the huge majority of accounts that are produced by and for organizations, then there is one model of organization that dominates the way financial reporting is being produced. The model is of the shareholder-owned organization. So that means organizations that, of course, I don't need to say in this forum, are owned primarily by shareholders, or at least have shareholders as a chunk of their ownership and ultimately decision-making structure. The problem, of course, is that, again, I don't need to overlabor this point in this forum. The problem is that it is a small minority of the organizations that we know. In fact, and this is what I'll talk about later, if you compare the shareholder-owned sector of the economy to cooperatives and mutuals, there are many more members in the UK and even more so in other European countries. There are many more members of co-ops and mutuals than there are shareholders of companies. Even if you take into account pension funds, where people hold shares indirectly, it is much higher in the co-ops and mutuals, and I'm not even mentioning other forms of non-governmental organizations, which of course are not shareholder-based, charities and others. So that's one problem. The dominant model according to which we generate financial account report on the value creation and performance of organizations is a minority. That's one big problem. We're not talking about what's really happening in society, organization-wise. Secondly, even in shareholder-owned organizations, other stakeholders, as Jeremy very rightly said, or at least implied in his intervention, make up a lot of the value creation processes. So what do we have? We have a set of techniques and an underpinning cosmology, worldview, that does not really fit to purpose. It talks to a minority of organizations, and even with these organizations, it leaves out of the picture quite a lot of the actors that are involved, as if we were watching the world through just one eye and kind of squinting the other one and trying to assess the world through this very biased and partial picture. So we do have a problem with financial accounting.
Thank you. Paolo.
Thank you, Patricia. I would like to link what I'm going to say to both what was said in the previous session and what my colleagues have just said now. I mean, in the previous session, it was said accounting can change the world. I would say that accounting has already changed the world. I also have one slide, which is, if you can put it up, which is a very standard income statement. If you can, that's the income statements that everyone knows, but very few actually question. This is not an income statement. This is a political statement. It tells that the most important institution in corporate capitalism is the shareholder. And so, in a sense, this is not a statement where debate can happen. It clearly focuses the entire calculation of value towards the interest of those who are going to get dividends through profits. And this is what Yuval was mentioning before. This is possibly something that everyone realizes, but it doesn't, it is not that clear how powerful accounting is in portraying certain reality and making them be taken for granted. The second thing, and this again I've heard in the previous session quite a lot, in a sense, this statement also presupposes a great belief in transparency. We can see how the different functions, manufacturing, other operating functions, finance, have created value in the interest, again, of the shareholder, who can measure this production value in order to appropriate this value. But we know that transparency is a dream. So rather than seeking measurement for the sake of measurement, I think we should seek measurement for the sake of judgment and debate and mediation and the mediation of different tensions amongst those stakeholders who rotate around the organization as an institution. The third thing is that the solution that all these various initiatives have been trying to portray, to go beyond a view of acting as focused with exclusively with profit and finance, is to measure the non-financial, the GRI initiatives, the SDGs. And I think that this is a problem because, in a sense, the moment in which we do not talk about money, these things become ceremonial. They become PR exercises. They become instruments to look good rather than doing good. And so maybe later we can discuss how we can bring non-financial issues back to financial numbers and have an income statement that can be used as a platform of mediation, negotiation amongst different stakeholders rather than as a neutral mechanism of measurement.
Thank you very much. I hope the audience is not missing this bit because knowledge is power. So my second question for you is, okay, many problems, technical problems, political problems. So what are the solutions? What can we do? So Jeremy, let's start with you. Now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, great. So the solution's really quite simple. We have a financial accounting regime which produces information to help investors, the users, make decisions based on the ability of a company to produce net cash inflows, which will subsequently potentially either generate dividends for those investors or growth in shareholder value. That doesn't have to be that. There's absolutely no reason why, as a society, we couldn't say that the purpose of accounts is to produce information for people who want to make a financial return subject to, or as well as, there being environmental and social returns. And if we change that bit at the basic building block of our accounting regime, suddenly we would have to have a set of accounts that did consider all the issues and concerns that we've been talking about. So the challenge is, how do you do that? Well, changing legislation is never easy, but we have to have that aspiration and that ambition. We really do. We haven't got a huge amount of time to address these issues. And at the moment, an incremental approach to getting better and fixing a voluntary method is moving along, but nothing like as fast enough. And when you think back, I think about the way in which legislation has changed in society. When you think about changes to the ability to vote and who can get to vote and the access to medical care, there's been the fact that we legitimize trade unions. There's been a whole number of changes that we've made, which before they happened, everyone would have sat around going, this is really difficult. How do we actually change policy? So we have to campaign. We have to recognize that this is a policy issue that it's a cross-party policy issue. It's not a particularly political one, I would argue. It's a building block for our society most generally. And we need to act together. We need to share, argue, debate, put together those policy positions, get them into manifestos, get them onto programs, and start to have influence that way. And never say, hey, you can't do it, it's too difficult, because so much of the world would never have changed as it has done if people had sat around and said that at the time.
Thank you. Yuval, what is your view? What can we do? What should we do?
Right, thank you. So we're always accused as academics that we're very good at pointing out the problems. We never come up with solutions. But in this case, I know what Paulo is going to say, but also from my perspective, we try to offer a bit of a solution. If you can move to the next slide, I'd like to present a framework that I've developed with colleagues from Monash University in Australia, Matthew Hall, Paul Dunbar, and Sarah Adams from ANU, from the Australian National University. And this project, I have to say, of course, was supported by BCCM, which is the Business Council for Cooperatives and Mutuals in Australia. The framework was created in order to measure the value that mutuals and co-ops generate, but really, as we identified when we started running the framework in actual organizations, other organizations, including shareholder-based organizations and charities, can use the exact same, or at least elements of the framework to assess, as Jeremy said, their value creation in relation to wider sets of audiences or elements of society. So let me go very quickly through the elements that can actually work. There are 6 dimensions. You can see them here in different colors, going from top to bottom. For each of these dimensions, the organization is required to report on the description of their value creation, how they create it, what measures they use, and they are helped to develop these measures if they are not fully developed. And if they have a future idea then that's also included. So you can see that it's not classical financial accounting that is only backward looking. It also has a projected and also managerial planning element. What are the dimensions? Commerciality, that's very, very relevant, of course, but almost the same as most of the financial elements that are reported in financial accounting, and that's the generation of sustainable economic value in the organization. Then we start moving into things that are not covered in financial accounting. The second dimension we call shaping markets, and that means the value that the shareholders get from the actual existence in the organization in a market. This is something that we saw from many mutuals, but also other organizations commented that by being there and providing more competition to others, they make the entire market better for consumers, for regulators, for the environment. So shaping market is a value creating dimension. Then there are two elements that relate to the members.
Yuval,
or
we're running out of
for-profit
time.
organization.
We're running out of time, so what I want to do is I'm going to ask the Impact Forum team to post in the chat the links to the site to elaborate, and then let's go 20 seconds with you, Paolo, and let's finish this session. So, how about the solutions?
Yeah,
very quickly. Thank you.
Without showing this, I think if accountants can change the world, they can do that only by changing the format of the income statement. And this does not mean to reinvent the wheel. So, for instance, we can have an income statement based on value added, and so we see the production and the distribution of value amongst different stakeholders. This will imply the workers are not just a resource to be squeezed, but a resource to be remunerated. And if we add another line, which would be a provision for nature, we recognize also the destruction of value and the need to reconstitute that value with the creation of a fund for nature and making nature a stakeholder at the same level with the same rights of all the others. Small changes can actually make a big change, a big impact in the world.
Thank you. I would love to speak more and more with you, but we have to finish here. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your inputs. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.